I knew something was seriously wrong the moment I pulled into my driveway after work and found a complete stranger charging their electric SUV using the charger mounted on the side of my garage while sitting casually in a lawn chair drinking coffee, like they had every right to be there, and standing beside them with her arms crossed, smiling proudly, was the HOA president Karen herself, acting like she had just proven some huge point to the entire neighborhood. For a few seconds, I honestly thought maybe somebody had made a mistake because no normal person would walk onto private property, plug into someone else's power, and act comfortable doing it. But then Karen looked directly at me and said, "Finally, you are home. Maybe now, you can explain why you think this charger belongs only to you." I remember just staring at her trying to process what I was hearing because the charger was physically attached to my house, connected directly to my electrical panel, installed entirely at my expense and sitting halfway up my private driveway, nowhere near public access roads or HOA property. Yet somehow this woman had convinced herself it was community property. The stranger unplugged the SUV, slowly looking nervous, while Karen kept talking confidently, explaining that because the charger was visible from the street and environmentally beneficial, the HOA considered it a shared neighborhood resource available to residents when needed. Shared neighborhood resource. She said that phrase with complete seriousness. At first I honestly laughed because the idea sounded completely insane, but Karen did not laugh back. She actually pulled out printed HOA papers claiming the board voted to classify visible exterior charging equipment as part of a new community sustainability initiative. That was when I realized this was not random entitlement anymore. This was organized stupidity backed by people who genuinely thought HOA rules overpowered actual property law. Before this story gets even crazier, make sure you like this video and subscribe to Karen Stories Daily, because what happened after Karen pushed this nonsense too far ended up shaking that entire HOA apart. Now, to understand how things reached this point, you need a little background, because Karen had been obsessed with controlling my property almost since the day I moved into the neighborhood. She complained about my landscaping, my cameras, my outdoor lighting, even my mailbox once, because she thought the color looked too modern for the community aesthetic, and every interaction with her felt less like dealing with a neighbor and more like dealing with someone desperate to prove authority over anything she could reach. Things got worse after I installed the EV charger, because several residents started asking about getting their own, and apparently Karen hated the idea that one homeowner had something others did not, especially when she could not directly control access to it. At first, she simply demanded I make it available during emergencies, which I politely refused because, besides the obvious issue of strangers using my electricity, there were liability risks, property concerns, and insurance problems involved. She acted offended immediately and accused me of refusing to support the community. After that, strange things started happening. Cars began parking near my driveway. Late at night, neighbors asked weird questions about charger access. One morning, I even found fingerprints all over the charging unit, like somebody had been trying to force it open. That was the moment I decided to protect myself properly, because experience taught me something very important. People who ignore boundaries usually escalate once they think nobody will stop them. So I contacted my attorney friend who specialized in property disputes, and together we started quietly documenting everything. Every HOA notice, every conversation, every unauthorized attempt to access the charger, all of it. Then Karen made the biggest mistake possible. She sent an official HOA email claiming residents had temporary access rights to environmentally supportive exterior utilities visible from public areas, pending future community regulation review. In other words, she put the insanity in writing. The second I saw that email, I knew she had just walked directly into a legal trap without realizing it, because hidden deep inside HOA bylaws and state property regulations was something Karen clearly never bothered reading carefully. An HOA cannot legally authorize public use of privately owned electrical infrastructure without ownership, agreements, insurance compliance, utility licensing, and homeowner consent, and attempting to do so while encouraging physical access to private property created serious liability exposure for the board itself. So instead of fighting immediately, I stayed quiet. I let them continue. I installed additional cameras around the driveway, upgraded monitoring software, and waited, because Honestly, sometimes the fastest way to expose bad behavior is simply allowing people enough confidence to expose themselves fully. And expose themselves they absolutely did. Within 2 weeks, residents started openly using my driveway to access the charger. Because Karen kept telling everyone the HOA approved it and every single incident was captured clearly on video cars blocking my entrance extension cords across my lawn, strangers walking beside my garage at night and repeated unauthorized power usage directly tied to HOA instructions, then came the incident that changed everything. One evening, a resident tripped over a charging cable while leaving my driveway and damaged the side of their vehicle against my retaining wall, and instead of accepting responsibility, Karen immediately blamed me, claiming my property setup created unsafe public access conditions on private property, using electricity I paid for. That was the exact moment my attorney finally told me we had more than enough evidence to move forward, and what happened next sent absolute panic through the entire HOA board, because Karen still had no idea the legal nightmare she had created for herself and everyone who followed her instructions. The moment legal notices reached the HOA board, the entire atmosphere in the neighborhood changed, because suddenly the same people who laughed about using my charger realized they had been following completely illegal instructions the whole time. Attorney filed claims connected to unauthorized property access, liability exposure, utility misuse, and repeated HOA overreach, backed by weeks of security footage, emails, and written statements directly from Karen herself. And honestly, the strongest evidence was not even the videos, it was her own HOA email where she claimed residents had access rights to my private charger. That single message destroyed almost every argument they tried making afterward. The board held an emergency meeting within days, and for the first time, Karen did not look confident. She looked nervous because now attorneys, insurance representatives, and even utility officials were involved, asking very serious questions about why the HOA encouraged residents to enter private property and use privately owned electrical equipment without permission or legal authority. Several residents became angry after realizing they could have been personally liable if someone had gotten seriously injured while following HOA instructions, and suddenly people who once supported Karen started turning against her fast. The HOA attorney eventually advised the board to completely reverse the policy, remove all community access claims, and issue formal written apologies to affected homeowners, including me. Karen tried blaming misunderstandings and communication errors, but by then nobody believed her anymore because everything had been documented too clearly. In the end, the HOA paid legal settlement costs, new property protections were installed around my driveway, and Karen quietly resigned from the board not long after the entire mess became public inside the neighborhood. What stayed with me most was how dangerous fake authority becomes when someone believes rules matter more than actual law. If you made it this far, let me know what you would have done in this situation and share this story with someone who needs to hear it, and do not forget to subscribe to Karen Stories Daily for more stories like this, where entitlement always collapses once real consequences finally arrive.